off, and no video recording, apart of course obviously from the camera crew. Thank you, Secretariat, and thank you, Commissioners. Lead Counsel, we are ready.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Before we start, I hand over the floor to you to lead the prayers. Thank you.
Prayers, please.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين وإن تستفتحوا فقد جاءكم الفتح نصر من الله وفتح قريب وبشر المؤمنين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الفلق من شر ما خلق ومن شر غاسق إذا وقب ومن شر النفاثات في العقد ومن شر حاسد إذا حسد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل أعوذ برب الناس ملك الناس إله الناس من شر وسواس الخناس الذي يوسوس في صدور الناس من الجنة والناس إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما صلى الله تعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Lord God of truth, of mercy, and of grace, and of compassion, we, the TRRC, are gathered here under your umbrella, this beginning of this new week. We give ourselves unreservedly under your control and your Holy Spirit's direction. We pray that all the proceedings throughout this week will be ordered and that things will come out for good, for the common good of all who live in this land. For this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Lead Counsel.
May I ask that the witness be brought, please? Madam Chair, this would be our fourth witness. May you please stand and take the oath?
I, Alhaji Kante,
I, Alhaji Kante,
swear that I will speak the truth,
swear that I will speak the truth,
the whole truth,
and
nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me Allah.
Good morning, Mr. Kante. Welcome to the TRRC. We are now ready to take your testimony. You have just taken the oath. Are you ready to begin?
Yes, please, I'm ready.
Kindly provide us with your full name.
I am retired Captain Alhaji Kante.
What is your date of birth?
I was born on the 6th of January 1964.
Whereabout were you born?
In Jabakunda, in the North Bank Division, Central Bari.
Mr. Kante, earlier on I briefed you about the protocol in these proceedings in order to enable the recorders and the transcribers to get everything that we say. We should allow about 3 to 5 seconds between the speeches that we make. When I speak,
and end, you allow 2 to 3 seconds before you start speaking, and I would also do the same. Do you understand?
Very well, I understand.
You told us that you were born in Njaba Kunda. Where did you go to school? Microphone, please.
Sorry. I went to school in Javakunda itself, and primary school, and then proceeded to Armitage High School.
When did you finish Armitage High School?
1982.
What did you do after that? Give us a detailed chronology of what you did soon after you finished Armitage High School.
Well, immediately I finished Armitage High School at the age of 18, I think. I wanted to be a journalist. And so I tried to pursue this career with the Ministry of Information. I think the director then was the veteran Swaibu Konate. At some point, my efforts were frustrated for some reason I can't explain. And the second option was to join the security services. It was in 1982 itself I tried to join the Gendarmerie, the National Gendarme. But my father won't allow it. So I aborted the idea. Soon after, I went to join the Ministry of Agriculture as a researcher and the rice department in Sapo. And I was posted to Janjaweed.
Before this time, did you make an attempt to join any other security outfit in Gambia?
Oh yes, I tried to join the police also. As a cadet officer, I applied to be a cadet officer. It was not possible also because when I handed in my application, I was told there was a form to fill, and somewhere stated that somebody needed to ascertain sort of a guarantee, a political guarantee. So politically, my representative was Dr. Lamin Kebasaho for Central Baribo. He was not around.
Could you say his name again, Dr. Lamin who?
Dr. Lamin Kebasaho, Nafasaho. All right, so he wasn't around, he was out of town. Then I decided to go see his counterpart, Dr. Mane. I was successful in reaching him. I explained my case. I told him as my representative, he's also from Badibu, I think, but representative of Jokadu. Then he asked me what party my father supported or my family supported. I told him I wasn't interested. We get there. So he sent me out of his office.
Did you eventually get into the police?
No, I didn't.
So you want us to believe that you didn't get into the police simply because Dr. Mane would not sign your papers because you wouldn't tell him which political party your father supported, correct?
Yeah, that could be correct. I'm not sure if that is totally correct, but Dr. Mane wouldn't sign my papers, so my effort was aborted.
What did you do next?
Then I continued to pursue a job. Naturally, as a school leaver, I needed a job. I went to Agriculture and got a job.
May I announce for the record that the chairman, Dr. Lamin Sise, has just joined these proceedings. Mr. Witness, could you proceed? You said you went to the Ministry of Agriculture to look for a job, and what happened after that?
After that, I got a job with the Ministry of Agriculture, and I was posted to Sapo, Georgetown area. And
To
for 2
do
years,
what? To do what? What was the nature of the job you got?
As an agricultural extension worker.
For how long did you remain in that post?
About 2 years. I did that job for about 2 years.
And what happened? Why did you leave?
Well, I thought I needed to pursue further my dream of becoming a security service officer. Then I came down to Banjul to find out if I could get another job. And I went to the Ministry of Education. They posted me to Crab Island Secondary School to teach.
Do you recall which year this was?
This was in 1985.
And what were you to teach at Crab Island?
I taught agricultural science for about 8 months.
Did you continue your career in teaching?
No, I made another jump. The army came on, so I went to the army.
Why did you go to the army?
Well, Council, I told you it was my dream to go to the security, so the army was the perfect place to.
Which year did you go to join the army?
In 1985.
And can you tell us about that, how you joined and what happened to you while you were in the army, how you progressed?
Yes, 1985, I joined the army, the batch called Fort Intake. And
What intake? Could you clarify that? Which intake?
Intake 4. And can I proceed? And yeah, so it was recruit training, and we passed out. We all had our responsibilities. Some were commissioned, others not. Of course, not many would be commissioned, of course. Many are called, few are chosen.
Were you commissioned at that time?
No, I wasn't commissioned.
Did you get a rank upon completion of training?
Yeah, I had a Lance Corporal rank, and I continued working with the administration, DNA administration, admin office, until 1990. I got frustrated again because I thought I was qualified to be an officer. I applied several times, and I was refused. But luck came around when the British team, then the British Army training team, spotted my talent. They insisted that I should be shortlisted. And I was shortlisted and did the course. I performed top of my class, and that's how I came to be an officer.
So you got commissioned eventually?
Yes, I got commissioned eventually.
Which year was this?
Of course, you cannot get commissioned without going through, well, under normal circumstances. You can't get the commission without going through officer training overseas. So in 1990, October, November, having completed the CSB, which is called the Commission Selection Board, which every officer or every candidate should go through to pass before you become an officer cadet, and eventually an officer. For the first time in the history of the Gambia Army, a candidate was able to pass this test halfway through the course. And that's what I did. I did that demonstrating the fact that despite the fact that I was denied for 5 years to get commissioned, I proved to the team, I proved to the Army that I could do it, and I passed halfway through the course.
When you completed the course, when you passed, were you given any particular rank or status in the army before you went for any further training?
Yes, I was an officer cadet. That's the rank is a white patch. Normally you wear it for a long time. Some people would do it for a year, two, but I had it for a month. And then I went to Sandhurst. I was sent to Sandhurst to train.
By Sandhurst, you mean Sandhurst Military Academy, right?
Yes, I mean this Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst, UK.
And how long was the course in Sandhurst?
Sandhurst is supposed to be a year course, but for overseas students, sometimes you need to go to another institution, a pre-Sandhurst training institution, and it is supposed to acclimatize you, get used to the country, to learn the language. If you do not speak English in your home country, you also have the opportunity to learn other skills such as communication and so on. So we went there for 6 months. That is the Royal Army Education Corps Center in Beaconsfield, UK.
Did you eventually finish your course in Sandhurst?
Yes, I did.
Could you kindly tell us the year, please, the year you completed Sandhurst?
April 1992, sir.
And you returned to Gambia soon after your course, correct?
Yes, I did.
What happened after that?
Yes, I got commissioned second lieutenant and took up position as platoon commander at Union Barracks.
Did you do any further training after Sandhurst?
Yes, the following year I went to the United States at Fort Benning Military School as a young officer, for young officers training course.
That would be in which year?
Like I said, the following year, that would be 1993.
Thank you very much. And what position did you hold upon your return to the Gambia?
I served briefly as a platoon commander at UNUP, and then you may remember the Nigerians were here. I found the Nigerians here in the army. They thought it was better for me to move to the army headquarters to be a staff officer. I combined the duties of a press and public relations officer plus an SO2 officer, staff officer, grade 2, responsible for administration and logistics.
You talked about the British having been responsible for your selection or your shortlisting as candidate for officer cadet. Can you tell us briefly about the presence of the British in the Gambia National Army in those years?
The British came to the Gambia on the invitation of the Gambia government to help us set up and train the Gambia National Army. So it was an act of parliament, I think, 1983, 1984, and then the army came into being in 1984. So our batch was 1985, so you could say that we went in quite early. They instituted, they set up the army and instituted discipline and ethics and regimentation.
To what degree of success would you rate the efforts of the British in establishing discipline and regimentation?
Well, I know that firsthand because I trained with them also in their best academy in Santos. So I would rate them without bias as the best in the world. So they came and set up an army for us. They saw us what an army was supposed to be like and what we were supposed to do, what an army was supposed to be like in a democracy.
Did the British continue with the army, or did they subsequently leave?
Yeah, the British left at some point. Their mandate expired. They left. But of course, not without controversy. So I think they left at a time when the army was going through a lot of difficulties. I guess there will be a question to that effect, but I better take this opportunity to say that when they left, the army was not at all okay. Troops had returned from peacekeeping operations, and they were dissatisfied with how they were handled, their allowances, and so on. So they left, and then there was a lot of dissatisfaction within the rank and file.
Can you kindly tell us about this dissatisfaction, what it entails or entailed at the time?
I think when they came from Liberia in the late 90s and late 80s and early 90s, they felt very disappointed that upon arrival they had difficulty getting their allowances due to them. So it affected their morale, it affected their output, it affected their performances. So there had been a lot of rancor within the ranks, between the rank and file and the officers, especially those at the top, the commanders especially, and the Ministry of Defense. And it is a common story, soldiers were arrested, detained at mile 2, some were dismissed because they couldn't get their dues at that time. So that became a turning point for the army, for what perhaps also contributed to the 1994 coup d'etat.
Did those problems or those mutinies, as you call them, have an impact on the leadership of the army?
Yes, Council, it had a real impact on the leadership because there was no more confidence in the leadership of the army. The commander at some point was moved to France as to be ambassador of France or so, and he was replaced by a gentleman called Maba Diop.
For how long did Maba serve as commander, do you know?
Well, I wouldn't know because at that point I was moving in and out of the country. I was moving from one coast to another, so all this happened very quickly. So I don't know how long Maba Diop served as commander.
When you returned from Fort Benning for training, who was commander of the army?
Well, I found Nigerians in the army, and the Colonel Abu Kadada was the commander of the army.
So you're telling us that in between your trips in and out of the country, Maba Diop was removed and replaced by a Nigerian called Dada. Is that right?
You bet.
Can we be a little more formal in our language? Do you mean yes?
Answer, yes, to be precise.
Thank you very much. And before we talk about the issue of the Nigerians in the army, I want you to, you have earlier on indicated that there was a lot of dissatisfaction in the army. You mentioned one factor, that is the non-payment of allowances to veterans from Liberia. Can you tell us what other problems there were in the army at this stage? I noticed that you have taken out a copy of your statement, Could you kindly put that aside for the time being, and we just go through your testimony. If it becomes necessary for you to refer to your statement, I will direct you. But in the meantime, kindly tell us what were the other problems in the army. Put aside the issue of the Nigerians for the time being. What are the other problems in the army between, say, 1990 to 1993? The Nigerians aside.
Like I said, the non-payment or part payment issues of allowances and emoluments accruing from peacekeeping was one. There was also breakdown in command and control within the armed forces.
Can you explain what that means, breakdown in command and control within the army?
Council soldiers didn't have confidence in their commanders. And it is important in the army or in the military that soldiers have total confidence in their commanders. That motivates them a lot.
Do you know what were the reasons for this lack of confidence in the commanders?
I know there was corruption. I know in the outer world, in the outer country, in the government. And so this corruption tendency reflected very much on the army as well. There was nepotism, there was cronyism, there was pick and choose. I cited my own case where I was denied commission for 5 years, even though I was qualified. I realized people were commissioned without even passing through the essential prerequisite training course of CSB, that is the Commission Selection Board, and they got commissioned, notwithstanding. There were also instances of commander taking soldiers to his own farm to work. And libertarian philosophy would call this slavery in that sense, where somebody is forced to work without pay. That would be slavery, and that's exactly what happened in the 1990s, 80s and the 90s, when the commander's farm was open to soldiers to go there. Once I refused to go. In fact, I never went. I refused to go, and I nearly got dismissed. Soldiers complained a lot. They had no choice but to take turns going to the commander's farm. The engineering corps of the army, who were responsible for building houses and other things, were also taken to the commander's house to build houses for the commander. So these were very demoralizing. We're not supposed to work for individuals. We're supposed to work for the government.
How about the conditions in the barracks? Were there any problems with that?
Yes, housing wasn't good. Food wasn't good. We described the food as wata chew.
As what?
Wata chew. Water chew. That, chew in our language means chew, sauce. So water chew is how we used to describe it. And even the cook, chief cook would call it water chew. Kubuganga leka kubuganga bai. So this was the food that we were forced to force down our throats. And the tea wasn't good either. So food wasn't good. Housing wasn't good. Incentives were not. Soldiers were standing along roadsides, waving to get to work, waving, begging for leave to go to work. That wasn't good. That was very demoralizing.
You told us that there was nepotism and cronyism. Did the local politics have anything to do with that?
Yes, I think what happened in the outer world always reflects on the inner world. What happened in the government was what was reflected in the army. There was corruption in government. There was nepotism in government during President Jawara's reign for 30 years. We've seen it all over. We're old enough now. We know these things. We read stories of corruption and journalists being charged and dragged to court for making allegations against ministers who were found wanting one way or the other, like the Tix case, Sanamane, who accused Sabali, Saho, and Landing Jallo Sonko, for example. Nothing came out of it. I think what happened was, if anything, Sabali was promoted. He became the vice president.
Which Sabali are you
Sekou
referring
Sabali
to?
was promoted from, was it finance minister to, what, no, not finance. He became vice president anyway from a ministry to vice president, notwithstanding the corruption allegations. And we also...
Are you suggesting that this was also one of the problems that lead to dissatisfaction within the army?
No, you asked me if there was any other thing. We are citizens also. Soldiers are citizens. Not only do they live in barracks, they also live within the country, and they see what is happening within the country. So what is happening there is what is tolerated within the military as well. So a commander says, get up, go to my farm. Soldiers get up and go and walk without pay.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. My question was, you had earlier explained that there was corruption, and then you cited this example where there were allegations of corruption against Mr. Sekou Sabali, and he was thereafter promoted to become Vice President and Minister of Defense. My question to you is whether this event had an impact on the soldiers in the army.
Yeah, it had an effect on soldiers who were politically alive. You know, you don't expect junior soldiers to catch these things, but some of them would. But the officer corps was really alive to what was happening in the country. I remember, you know, an army is an extension of politics.
Your word, or the word you used, was the alive, that the army was alive, the officer corps was alive to that particular fact. How did they receive that information?
We read, we listen to news just like everybody else. We read papers like Foria, for example, which at the time was very instrumental in shaping our understanding and tracing our horizon to what was happening in the country. So we pretty well understood what was happening in the country, and it wasn't good.
Let me rephrase the question. Were you happy about that information that Sekou Sabali, who's been alleged as being corrupt at that time that you mentioned, was promoted to become Vice President and Minister of Defense? Were you happy about that?
I thought you would ask the question in the other way around, because we couldn't be happy. How could we be happy when things are not in order in the country?
And many others, how about the other junior officers, apart from yourself? How do you read their mood at the time when Sekou Sabali was appointed to these two important positions?
I don't want to emphasize this as the single most important case that affects soldiers or so. Perhaps it's not the most important. We had other issues, bread and butter issues at the time.
I agree, Mr. Witness. I just want to hammer home what all these factors were and take them one by one. Let's now focus on this particular issue. You said you were not happy as an officer. How about the other junior officers? Were they happy about the situation?
I don't want to speak for anybody, but I guess they were not also happy.
So you did say that there were other more important factors. Could you tell us about those factors?
The army went to the point where it looked like it belonged to an individual family or an individual clan or an individual entity or a business entity. And there was no avenue whatsoever to do anything. You could complain. You couldn't even complain out loud. You couldn't do that. It's a disciplined organization. So we saw these things happen. People passing through the back way, getting what they want, lobbying and so on. And an army is supposed to be a disciplined entity.
You use the word, the phrase rather, it's not supposed to be clan. Why clan? Was there a problem with regards to clans?
Yeah, we saw at the very top of the army friends and family, and in some cases also. We were not fools. We saw all these things happen there. We took note of them.
Mr. Witness, what I'm trying to get out of you is those things you saw happening. Tell us about them.
I'm not going to mention those names, but I know that, Ndaunjai was there. I would mention his name because he was the commander. And you could look at the ranks, you look at the officer corps, the first 10, 15 officers had some connection with him, directly or indirectly.
How was that received in the army?
Not favorably.
Could you tell us more about that? How people felt?
Like I said, I can't tell you how everybody felt. I can only tell you how I felt. I was not prepared to go forward. I was not prepared to continue with the army. At some point, I was ready to leave. Until law came our way, the British said, no, you wouldn't leave because you can be a good officer, and we believe you can do it. So that's how things shaped up for me. But I guess there were people who also left the army because they were dissatisfied after 5, 6 years.
You talked about the presence of the Nigerian officers in the army. You said you went for training, and when you returned, you found the Nigerians in charge. Do you recall that?
Yes, I found the Nigerians on the ground. The commander was Dada. He brought a team of trainers, so-called. So that's why it's called Nigerian Army Training Team in the first place. So he was commander of the army. In the first place, we thought that it is unconstitutional for a foreigner to command a sovereign army if it is not a war situation. We went through this before in the gendarmerie. Perhaps I won't say much about that. I know very little about gendarmerie. But in the army, it's not supposed to be that way. A foreigner shouldn't command. How does it feel when a foreigner becomes president of the Gambia, or becomes a minister, or a cabinet minister? So we felt that something was wrong here. We couldn't have the Nigerians come command our army. As a training team, they could come up with a small team of trainers, establish the offices, and technically advise us on the way forward. But they came here and took over our army, and so that was not right.
Up to what level did they take over in terms of the command structure?
Well, they were the commanders. They were the staff officers. A Gambian is a commander only if he is second to a Nigerian. I was second to a Nigerian as public relations officer, staff officer. So that was it. And we had to contend with that for all along.
How did the men feel about that? I would ask you how the junior officers felt and also the senior officers. For now, how did the men feel about the fact that their commanders were Nigerians?
Yeah, the men might not have been much into politics of the army at the time. They only knew that periodically the army would be stripped of its sovereignty from time to time. But what that meant to them might not matter. But for for the officer class, that was very, very funny. And even the men, some were not up to, they didn't agree with that. How could we undergo this periodic change of guard, and all the time they are foreigners? What is wrong with our commanders? Are they not educated enough? Are they not trained enough to train us? So these were the questions that they were asking, and we felt ashamed of ourselves. I trained in Sandhurst, and I trained with British officers. I trained with officers all over the world, and we did very, very well. Came back here, 5 Nigerians here, who I am so did not attend those institutions. And I watched them. I watched them, and I saw them in action, and I knew they didn't get it right.
You have talked about yourself. You have talked about the men. How about the other junior officers, those who were at your level? How did they feel about the presence of the Nigerians and the positions the Nigerians held at the time?
Yeah, they were equally dissatisfied. To what extent, I don't know, but almost all of them expressed similar dissatisfaction that Nigerians were in our army, telling us what to do, sometimes condescendingly. We had to put up with all this hardship and humiliation at that point. I don't know how the other officers felt, but for us, the junior officers, I mean the lieutenants and the second lieutenants, it was too hard.
Were there any problems regarding the allocation of resources, facilities, and privileges?
I'm not okay with the budget then and as of now, but I know that the army had very little allocation, and that's why we had problems with food, we have problems with accommodation, transportation, and logistics, because the army is as efficient as its logistics, transportation, and facilities. So you cannot have an efficient army without, all these requirements. That's why we ran into all these problems of lack of motivation and dissatisfaction.
How did the junior officers feel? Let me rephrase the question. Were the Gambian officers at par with the Nigerian officers in terms of facilities that were available to them?
So, no, not at all. If you'll allow me to direct on that, I believe the Nigerians were much more provided for. They had many allowances, housing, even though they were a technical team. They had all the facilities. We saw them in the Nigerian army. A lieutenant salary in the Gambia army was equal to a lieutenant colonel salary in the Nigerian army. But when they came here, they received 2-3 times our salary, and they had comfortable housing, transportation, and so on. We had to share cars. The Nigerians, they were comfortable.
Did that disparity have any impact on the feelings of the junior officers, Gambian junior officers in the army?
To be precise, yes.
How did you, the junior officers at the time, feel about the situation?
Well, we felt we were being toyed around, and we were being humiliated and insulted. And the Nigerians knew that we were not happy. I think at some point they realized that we were not happy. So they came up with what was called the terms and conditions of service, recommendations for the government, so they could also try to upgrade our conditions, see how best we could get more transport allowances and housing as officers and men. So I was part of the commission that set up the terms and conditions of service at the Army headquarters.
So, in a sense, what you're saying is, okay, the presence of the Nigerians had a lot of negatives, but it also had some positives, including the reorganization of the army and the preparation of the TACOS, that is the terms and conditions of service. Is that what you say?
Yeah, it is an unintended consequence of that. They came and they gave us TACOS. To their credit, yes, they gave us TACOS. They came up, well, okay, we have asked for it. They refused. But when the Nigerians recommended it, they accepted. So a commission was set up to look into the living conditions of troops and their commanders, and they recommended, I think at that time, $700 for majors and above for housing, and captains and under $700. $1,000 for majors and above, captains and under $700, the troops $300 or so for housing, and there were similar allowances for transport as well. So that was a bit of a breathing space for us. But of course, it was still not enough for us. We continued with our humiliation. It was not, the material benefit wasn't all. It didn't solve the problem. We wanted our army. That was it.
When you once said we wanted our army, you are referring to junior officers at this stage.
I think even senior officers and the men, no doubt about it. The difference is how did we handle it at our different levels.
Now let's talk about the senior officers. How did they respond to the presence of the Nigerians occupy and having them occupied command positions within the army?
Theirs was different from us, the junior officers then. They were quite mute about it, I guess because they thought that at some point the Nigerian Army training team would leave and it would be their turn to step in. Who held what responsibility would depend on the Nigerian recommendations. So they were very mindful of that fact, I think. And that's why they were very mute, and I would describe it as I think they were puppets of the Nigerians.
What do you mean by that? Can you further explain what you mean by the statement that they were puppets of the Nigerians?
Yeah, while we fought tooth and nail, junior officers, to ensure that we get what we want, including the departure of Nigerians, for the government to allow us to exercise what we've learned in institutions that we went to. The senior officers were not having any of it. They were busy trying to satisfy the Nigerians.
Do you know why they were trying to satisfy the Nigerians?
I cited the fact that they were busy competing among themselves who would occupy what position when the Nigerians left. So the Nigerians were there, and there was no time limit. I think at some point there was no time limit, so it became a little bit frustrating. Then they were, I think it was like, hey, this guy would be commander when the Nigerians leave, or this guy would be SO2 DAS, would be deputy DAS. So it felt like that for them. For us, it wasn't funny. It was, they shouldn't be here in the first place.
You said the senior officers were puppets. What would you say to this question? Would they do anything the Nigerians asked them to do at the time?
Yes.
Now let's look at the junior officers. Second lieutenant, lieutenant. How did they respond to the Nigerians?
Yeah, they had it very tough with us because they saw us as defiant. Not only defiant, they saw us as people who did not accept their authority outright, people who challenge and their ability to deliver, because we saw that they were not delivering. They were not doing what we thought they were here for, and they knew it. So that became it.
Can you give us an example of an instance in which you thought the Nigerians did not do what they were supposed to do?
We once had an exercise in Kudam, for example, and the exercise was supposed to be a training exercise. The entire army was there, and the organization was half-baked. The execution was zero. We stood there, we looked, we watched them perform. We stood there, and we couldn't understand that these were the people who were sent to us to train us. We were going to do it better. So from that day on, we thought something serious had gone wrong.
When you said we, who are you referring to at this stage?
I am referring to the junior officers.
Did you have a discussion about this as junior officers?
Oh yes, we had. We sat under the tree at some point and left them do what they were doing. Their actions were characterized by laziness and indifference. We stood aside and said, this is the training team. So we just went aside and said, we needed to do something about these people because they are not here for us. They are here for their pockets. They're big cars, they've got houses, and they're supposed to deliver, and they are not. They were not.
What do you mean by the statement, we stood aside? Can you further explain that? In military terms, what does that entail? What does it mean?
Well, if I learned surgery, and I was supposed to operate on a patient, and I saw another doctor come with another instrument, an instrument that is not suitable for surgery, and wanted to operate on that particular patient. The best option would be for me, as a qualified surgeon, to step aside and look, because otherwise I would be guilty of murder, just like him.
Were you guys rebelling against the Nigerian command at that time?
Yes, somehow, yes. We made them know that they needed to put their acts together at some point, because this was not how to train an army. We were with the British, we knew how they operated. And they came, and this time they were telling us things that were not in any pamphlet, they were not in any training manual. I guess it is like you take a weapon and go stand there or something. I just couldn't understand. It didn't fall in place. The jigsaw didn't fall in place.
And could you recall which junior officers gathered under the tree to talk about this?
Some of us, yes. Those who went there. I was there. Singate Edward was there.
What was his rank at the time?
Second lieutenant. Yankuba Ture was there.
What was his rank at the time?
He was second lieutenant as well. Sana Sabari was there.
What was his
Second
rank at the
lieutenant.
time?
All of us were second lieutenants. Yeah. I can name those names, yes.
During your discussion, did you reach an agreement as to what to do about that situation?
Yes, we thought we should raise awareness of the situation, that it was in the right way. We are not going in the right direction. The Nigerians were not good for us in this situation. If it had been only for justifying their pay, or maybe grab some money and go back to Nigeria and then leaving us alone at some point. But I think they were a bit condescending of us. They wanted to humiliate us at every point, and we knew they did not know. So that complicated the matter. So we said, look, we needed to show them that we won't take it.
How were you to do that?
At that point, we were not quite sure what to do, because we knew a mutiny was wrong. We won't do that. But we were prepared to inform the commanders, they themselves, or perhaps even march to the Ministry of Defense and put across our grievances and so on. But look, where would we go? The Ministry of Defense itself was not in order. There wasn't a single military background personnel apart from the staff officer, one staff officer. The rest of the Ministry of Defense had no idea what the military was like.
Was that also one of your problems?
Yes, that was also one of our problems, because I think I bumped into Dada one day, and then he warned me. He said, your pen would put you in trouble one day. That's what he told me. Why? Because I told him that at the Ministry of Defense we needed more staff with military background than we presently have. And he didn't think that was a comment that I should have made. I also cited the fact that logistics was in short supply. I said the world is changing. We need to change it along. Why wouldn't we have computers by now? Why is everything manual? Why would we type and store our information manually? We needed computers, and that called for resources. That was a write-up I made. You know, they have asked all of us to write something, so we wrote. I wrote that. He didn't like it, so he told me outright. He said, "But sorry, sir, but that was my opinion. You asked us to write, and that's what I wrote."
Still at Kudang, besides entertaining thoughts, excuse me, of a mutiny or going to your commanders and informing them about your grievances, did you entertain any other thoughts as to how you would deal with that situation?
Yeah, I guess a few weeks after we returned from Kudang, we decided to see again. We held a meeting, a clandestine meeting at Yundu, to talk more about this, to brainstorm. Then we decided that we couldn't get rid of the Nigerians without getting rid of the government itself. So then the idea of getting rid of the government started to float for the first time.
Can you kind of tell us who was at that meeting?
All the yeah, I was there. Edward was there. Yankuba was there.
Could you kindly tell us full names, please? Name and rank.
Oh, yes. Edward Singate, Second Lieutenant Edward Singate, Second Lieutenant Yankuba Ture. No, Yankuba wasn't, sorry. Haidara, Lieutenant Basiru Baro, Second Lieutenant Alpha Kinte, I think, were around.
Can you give us Haidara's full name, please?
So I knew Hydra's full name because we didn't spend long together. He came from the Zandan, so I forgot the surname.
What was his rank at the time?
He was a second lieutenant. Yes.
Back to the issue of the Kudang, just one question. Do you recall when that exercise in Kudang took place?
Yeah, this must be somewhere in, and I can't be sure. Huh? I don't know exactly, but I assume it was around around April, May or so.
Of which year?
Of 1994.
You said few weeks later, after you returned to barracks, you held a meeting. Which barracks are you referring to?
I am referring to Yundum Barracks, the home of the infantry of Gambia National Army.
You mentioned those who were involved in that meeting, and you mentioned a Yankuba Ture, lieutenant. Was he present or was he not present?
He was not present.
Was he present at the discussion you had under the tree in Kudang?
Yes, I think he was there.
In your discussion at Yundum Barracks, you mentioned Lieutenant Sanasabali, Lieutenant Singate, Lieutenant Barrow, Lieutenant Kinte, and Lieutenant Sadibu Haidara. Was Yaya Jame present, Lieutenant Yaya Jame?
No, he wasn't present.
Kindly tell us what happened in that so-called first clandestine meeting.
Yes, after, yeah, we opened the meeting with our usual idea of what can we do, what can we do about this situation, and the fact that now we are clandestine means that we've got to be we had some ideas, we've got to be very careful because we had Nigerians there who were not only very good at making coups, but also how to foil coups. So we were very careful of that, mindful. And we agreed that this government needed to go, rightly or wrongly. And that is what, honestly, we started working on.
Let's call a spade a spade. At this stage, you are planning a coup d'etat against the government. Is that right?
Yes, we are planning a coup d'etat against the government.
At this stage, did you have a leader?
No, we didn't have a leader.
Can you tell us how your discussion progressed and the conclusions you arrived at that meeting?
Yeah, we concluded that, yes, we will work on a coup d'etat, plans for a coup. And, but divisions, clear divisions surfaced there and then, that we had factions there and then, because there was a faction that said that we needed a Ghana-style coup where all the cabinet ministers of the government would be executed by firing squad, plus all the senior officers in the military who we consider to be puppets to be executed as well.
You said there were divisions. Who supported this Ghana-style coup in which ministers and senior officials would be executed by firing squad?
This was Edward Singate.
Do you mean Lieutenant Edward Singate?
I mean then Second Lieutenant Edward Singate.
Was he the only person who supported this position?
Well, he was the protagonist. So I can't remember who else supported the idea, but I know he was the protagonist of this idea.
What were the other ideas that were proposed at the time?
The other camp was where I belong. I thought it wasn't necessary to execute anybody. We needed a coup, and when the coup succeeds, that's all we needed. If anybody was wanting for doing anything, the law should take its course, and that was what made sense to some of us. And this is how we disagreed with each other then.
You said there were two camps. What divided these two camps that you mentioned?
Like I said, this was the sticking point, the main bone of contention between the camps. The coup, the idea of staging a coup wasn't the problem. We were unanimous on that. But how we went about with the coup was the question. How do we go brutal? Was it going to be a bloodless coup? Was the question. So the division started there. Some of us said no. We won't execute a single officer. We won't execute a single minister. We will say a coup and take over government, institute a government, make a transition, and hand over power to the civilians.
We now know that Edward Singate was the protagonist, according to you, for a Ghana-style coup in which ministers and senior officials would be executed. You belongs to the other camp which wanted a bloodless coup. Tell us which camp Lieutenant Sabali, Sana Sabali belongs to.
I'm not too sure which camp he belonged to, but I guess he had a leaning on Edward Singate's side.
Do you know who else supported your position?
Lieutenant Barrow supported my position, and Kinte supported my position. Lieutenant Kinte, Alpha, and Lieutenant Basir Barrow supported me.
Do you recall which side Lieutenant Sabali, Lieutenant Haidara supported?
No, I forgot which side he was on, really.
At that meeting, there was no unanimity, there was no agreement, on which way you would go, correct?
Correct.
What happened after that?
Yeah, there was a period of silence and introspection and reflection, and we thought we had to cool things down a little bit and compromise. But time was so short, a lot of things were happening, at the time. Then allegiances started shifting, new members started coming in on both on the side of Edward Singate, and that's how I guess Yaya Jammeh got briefed by Singate.
At what stage did you realize that Yaya Jammeh was in the picture?
It was very, very late in the game when I realized that Jammeh was in the picture, because then he had meetings with Singate, and perhaps Sabali too, somewhere around Fajara. They had their meetings there. We did not know about them, but we thought that we were waiting for a compromise on the issue of how to proceed. Our own position, my position, was clear and unshakable. I thought I made it very clear that I would not support a coup that would be bloody.
Do you know whether at any stage information about this particular coup plot or any other one got out in public?
Yes, there was a time, I guess the then NIA picked the signal somehow. They knew that something was going on, but for some reason they could not take action, and why, I don't know. Perhaps it's destiny. They would have discovered earlier that the coup was in the making. And that's why on the 21st, on the 22nd December 1994, before the coup, there was a guard of honor receiving President Jawara. Soldiers were disarmed. That was the tip they had. So some of the soldiers on guard with weapons were disarmed publicly at the airport.
Do you know how the soldiers felt about that particular event?
Humiliated, angry, and determined to ensure it doesn't happen again.
Were you at the airport on that day?
No, I was not.
Do you recall the date of this event?
Which event? The airport event?
Yes, Mr. Witness.
I know shortly before the coup, but I don't know exactly, a few days before.
Do you recall the date of the coup?
The coup was on the 22nd July 1994.
Can you tell us where you were the day before the coup?
Yes, a week leading to the coup, I received information that my brother in Germany passed away, and the family was very busy trying to fly the body back to the Gambia. And the burial took place on the 21st of July 1994. So I had no reason not to be there. I had to participate in the funeral arrangements, and that's where I was on the 21st. And then I took a ferry on the 22nd and crossed back to Banjul the following day.
Where did the burial take place?
It took place in Jabakunda, my home village.
And when did you return to Banjul?
I came with, I think, the second or third ferry or something, and crossed into Banjul on the 22nd July.
While at the ferry, did you hear anything?
Yes, before we even boarded the ferry, there were rumors of troop movement, and that something was happening or about to happen also. Of course, there was supposed to be an exercise with the American visiting Marines with SS Lamont County or something. They came here to exercise with the troops, Gambian Army troops, and that was publicized. And on this day, there was a lot of movement. So who knows what it was, but there was rumors of activities that were uncommon.
Did you eventually find out what was going on?
Yes, as soon as I disembarked from the ferry, I saw Singate's car. I saw Singate in a car going towards the Marine unit.
Singate are you referring to?
I'm sorry, Edward Singate. When I say Singate up to this point, it's Edward, not Peter. Edward Singate.
And where did you see him go?
I saw him heading to the Marine headquarters, just very close to the ferry terminal.
What did you do after that?
Well, naturally, I wanted to know what was going on, so I followed him to the Marine unit, and I met him in the Marine Commander's office, that is Major Antuman Saho.
What happened there?
Well, he briefed me. Immediately I arrived, he told me, well, it's a coup, and it has succeeded. It is a bloodless coup. I said, thank God, it's a bloodless coup, because that's what I wanted. But I met him at the office of, in the office of Major Antoine Saho. He was trying to coax him to join, because the Marine unit had very heavy weapons that they could have used to create chaos or perhaps put the success of the coup in jeopardy. So he was pleading with the Marine commander to support the coup. At that point in time, so at the time I spent there, we were the three sitting down in that office.
As far as you recall, how did Major Saho react? How did he respond to the request made by Lieutenant Edward Singati?
He was unsure what to say, what to do, because nobody at this point, nobody knew if it was a success or not. He was not, he was quite economical with words, a bit confused, I think, but Singate kept pushing. He promised him he would be a minister, cabinet minister, if he bought.
Did, as far as you recall, did Mr. Saho give his support?
No, at that point, no, I didn't. He didn't say yes or no. I then left them. I said I was going anyway, but Singate told me Yaya Jammeh was there at the State House, so I could go straight to the State House, and then I left him there.
At around what time did you arrive at the Marine unit?
I don't know. This must have been between 10 and 11 or something.
Do you recall what time you left the Marine unit?
It must have been after midday.
How did you go, by what means did you leave the Marine unit?
I took a car from the Marines and went to, I headed for State House, but before reaching State House, I passed through the police headquarters.
Were you alone in that vehicle?
No, I was with a driver.
Where did you get the driver?
The driver is a soldier, a Marine soldier.
So the Marine unit provided the driver and the vehicle for you to go to State House, correct?
Correct.
So you passed by police headquarters. What happened there?
Yeah, I found pandemonium at the police headquarters. There was a lot of noise and bangings and shouts from Sadibu Haidara and Sanda Sabali and Sonko, Captain Sonko, one Captain Sonko.
Do you recall his first name, Captain Sonko?
Captain Sonko we call Kanyala Manso. But I don't know, I forgot his Momodu Sonko. Yeah, Momodu Sonko.
You said there was a lot of noise, there was pandemonium, there was shouting. Can you provide more detail about what you saw happening there?
Well, yeah, they were trying to tell the police what to do. The police were perhaps not very interested, keen in that. They were afraid. I understand some of the commanders jumped over the fence to go home, and the rest who were there were confused. I know President was there, the then IGP. I didn't see him at that point, but the rest were really confused, and the soldiers were there, the officers were there, traumatizing them. then I came and told them it could be easier done than shouting and hustling about things. This is not the way it was supposed to be.
Apart from P.S. Jain, Pasala Jain, did you see which other senior officers can you recall to have been present there at the time?
Well, I don't know if I saw one Bolisar or something, but I'm not too sure. I think there were a number of police officers there. I don't recall them anymore. It has faded. Sorry.
Can you further describe how those officers you saw there, how they were treated?
Well, they felt under siege. They felt like captives. They were confused because something must have happened very early in the morning to them, that they needed to defend the bridge or something, and then all of a sudden soldiers bumped into their office telling them that the situation is over. They either do what they wanted them to do, they either did what they wanted them to do, or consequences or something. I guess the police were not used to gunmen around them and so on. So that was a very difficult moment for them too.
Did you see anybody beaten at the time?
No.
Any arrests?
There could have been arrests when I left, but at that point, no, there were no arrests.
Do you recall what time you left the police station?
I was not attentive. I was not attentive. Really, I won't be able to tell you exactly when. But then I left the police station. There also, so it was like I left one chaotic situation to another. Then I headed straight to the State House where Yaya Jammeh was.
This is a convenient time for me to stop and allow the commissioners to ask questions before we go to the first break. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lead Counsel. Thank you, witness. I now ask the commissioners if they have any questions. Not on this side. Not on this side. Thank you, Lead Counsel. No questions.
So,
take a half-an-hour break and come back at midday. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Witness. You may.